Hey guys, today we're going to be discussing alignments and what that means for you as well as the Model 3 Performance. Today we're going to be discussing all of the unplugged performance suspension links for the new Model 3 Performance. We're going to compare them to stock, discuss the benefits and why they might be right for your Tesla. Some of you may be wondering, now what is an alignment and why does that matter to me? Well, alignment basically refers to the direction and orientation of your wheels relative to your vehicle as you travel down the road. There are three main variables to consider with your vehicle alignment, and that's going to be toe, camber, and caster. How you set up your alignment for your vehicle is dependent on what your goals are, whether it be maximizing range and efficiency, tire life, performance, or chasing those lap times at the track. Let's start with toe. Toe is the direction that your wheels or tires are pointed relative to your vehicle. Toe in is when your tires are pointed towards each other. Toe out is when your tires are pointed away from each other. Now, from the factory, a lot of cars come with a default setting of toe in because this offers additional stability relative to toe out. Toe out is typically a more enthusiast or performance-oriented application as it makes the car more responsive in cornering application. Now, the reason this is important is because a lot of the load is applied to the outer tire, whereas if you had toe in, these two tires would be fighting each other. Now, Tesla from the factory offers a multi-link suspension for the Model 3 Performance, which essentially allows for minimal toe to optimize your overall tire life while having a dynamic change in toe as you turn in, which automatically by default does increase the toe out of the inner wheel relative to the outer. So you can actually minimize your overall tire wear on your daily driver while being able to optimize and still have good handling dynamics when you're cornering your Model 3 Performance. Next, we're going to discuss camber. Camber refers to the vertical angle of your wheels and tires relative to the ground. Positive camber is when the tops of the tires point away from the center of the vehicle. Negative camber is when the tops of the tires point towards the center of the vehicle. And zero camber is when your tires are flat on the ground. Now, you might be wondering, why do I want my tires to be anything but flat on the ground? From an efficiency standpoint and maximizing your tire life, you would be correct. You do want it to be flat on the ground. However, during dynamic driving and cornering, your tire experiences a lot of deflection. And what that means is the outside tires take a majority of the load of the car, and especially the outside of the tire itself. And through deflection, you get more compression on the outer sidewall and you get lift on the inner sidewall. So to compensate for that, you essentially add additional negative camber to ensure that you're maximizing your overall contact patch while cornering. Third is caster. Caster is the forward or rearward tilt angle of your steering axis. On the Model 3 Performance multi-link suspension, the steering axis is relative to the placement of the upper and lower ball joints and their offset relative to a vertical line. So if you were to draw a line between the upper and lower ball joints and measure the angle of that relative to a vertical line through your hub, that would determine your caster. Now let's discuss how caster impacts your overall vehicle dynamics. If you had zero caster, what that means is you would have a perpendicular line to the floor traveling directly through the hub, and your contact patch would remain completely flat through your steering axis. Now, if you were to add positive caster, what that means is the overall line between the upper and lower ball joints through the hub would essentially point in front of the tire. And what that means is as you go through your steering axis, the outside of the loaded tire would lift. And as it lifts, that creates a dynamic camber. And dynamic camber, as we discussed previously, creates additional contact patch, and additional contact patch means more grip. Now, the main reason that cars are designed with positive caster from the factory is because it allows the car to self-center when coming out of corners. Now, while the Model 3 Performance doesn't necessarily come with adjustable caster, it's actually kind of built into the engineering of the multi-link suspension. And what that essentially means is the caster itself changes through the overall steering arc, so even though it's not adjustable, you do get the added benefit of having better caster angles through cornering. All right, now that we know what toe, camber, and caster are, let's get this car on a lift, pull the OEM suspension off, and compare it to our unplugged performance suspension links. All right, we now have all of the rear suspension links out of the car and displayed on the table here right next to the Unplugged Performance arms. The OEM arms are hollow steel compared to the Unplugged Performance arms, which are going to be a solid billet aluminum. First, we're going to start with the camber arms. We got our camber, toe, traction, and trailing here. Now, for the camber arms themselves, from the factory, these do not offer, as you can tell, any sort of adjustment, and these come with a rubber bushing. So when you move on to the Unplugged Performance arm itself, You have a large range of adjustment which you can use to dial in whether you want to maximize your overall tire life or essentially add camber like we discussed previously to go ahead and apply that to performance oriented applications. Now for the arm itself, because it is a solid billet aluminum arm, it does offer more rigidity and a lot less flexion during extreme driving applications, as well as it comes with a spherical bushing as opposed to the rubber joint, and that offers less deflection, so you're retaining an optimal alignment at all times relative to a little bit of flex in the arm and the actual rubber bushing itself from the factory. Now moving on to the toe arm itself, Tesla did actually upgrade this on the 2024 Model 3 Highland Performance to have a spherical bushing from the factory as well as a fixed nut. So we are essentially going to be providing that on the Unplugged Performance toe arms, providing that nut so you can retain the OEM bolt. We are retaining both a spherical bushing in this case as well as the same adjustment range here while offering additional structural rigidity because this one is solid billet aluminum similar to the rest of the arms on this table. Now moving on to the trailing and traction arms that we have here, these are going to be more for those who are looking to get really precise feedback from their car. We're essentially reducing any sort of deflection points in these two arms as well, from the flex in the hollow steel arms to the rubber bushings that are offered from the factory by going with solid billet aluminum and sphericals on both of these as well. Now that we've discussed what these arms are and how you can essentially apply those to your vehicles, let's go ahead and get these installed on the car and then also move on to the front. All right guys, now we have the front suspension links out of the car. We have our front upper control arms here as well as our front lower control arms here. Now let's start with looking at the OEM front upper control arm compared to the Unplugged Performance front upper control arm. These come with rubber bushings which do have a little bit of deflection on both sides. Now when we move on to the Unplugged Performance billet aluminum, you have a lot less deflection in the overall arm itself. As well as you're moving on to sphericals all the way around. So you're reducing all of the deflection that would occur in the rubber joints themselves on the OEM when you mount this arm onto your car. Now, one of the primary benefits of the Unplugged Performance upper control arm is the wide range of camber adjustment that it offers. This allows you to either maximize your overall tread wear compared to the OEM arm, which does not offer any sort of adjustment, as well as you can also dial in your additional negative camber if you want to optimize for performance-oriented use. What's really nice is we do have a patented design on this pill. This allows you to essentially change your alignment on the fly by having two different Allen keys, screws rather, that essentially remove for a quick dynamic change. Now, it's not as simple as swapping this pill, so it does take a little bit of proactive work. You want to make sure that you go to your alignment shop and ask them for two different alignment specs up front, one for each setting of this pill when it's flipped. That way you can ensure that all of the other suspension links in the front, which in this case is literally just going to be the toe arm, have two different markers for you so that when you get to the track and you want the more performance-oriented ride, you can go ahead and make that quick adjustment, know that reference point, and not need an alignment tech at the track with you. Now moving on, we have our front lower control arms here. This is the forelink, and then we have the aft link as well. From the factory, these do come with large rubber bushings, which are subject to wear. And relative to the Unplugged Performance pre-pressed spherical bushings, they have a lot more deflection than these. So these are able to retain your alignment even during enthusiast-oriented driving, as well as the aft links themselves are kind of subject to the same thing, where they have a gigantic rubber bushing here, which we replace with a spherical to retain a very dialed alignment during enthusiast driving. So once you apply all of these things to your car, you can get a lot more control and a lot more direct feedback when driving. And the last thing you want when you're steering your car is to have that deflection, because that essentially yields inaccurate driving as these rubber bushings from the factory do flex. So if you're looking for a lot more feedback from your car, these Unplugged Performance suspension arms in the front are definitely the way to go. All right, now that we've discussed the purpose and function of what these arms are and what the Unplugged Performance arms offer over the OEM arms, let's go ahead and get these installed on the car and get that car on the alignment rack. All right guys, as you can tell, we have the car up on the rack now. We've installed all of our adjustable suspension links both in the rear and the front of the vehicle. Now we're gonna go ahead and get that dialed in. Now anytime that you change any sort of suspension link on your car, whether it's swapping out an OEM or an adjustable, on those replacements you might have a variance in casting, deflection, or the actual adjustment length itself. So it's always good to do another vehicle alignment following a suspension link replacement. This car is on lowering springs, so even though we did everything that we could to match the length of those arms to the OEM arm lengths, we definitely have some adjustments to make to get our preferred alignment specs for this driver and for this particular track application, which you will see in the next coming weeks. We got Lane under the car. He's going to be essentially dialing in that alignment for us, and we're going to be going with a little bit of a mild track baseline. This is going to essentially yield about -2.5 degrees camber in the front, -1.5 in the rear. And as we discussed earlier, we are going to have a little bit of toe in the rear for proper vehicle stability, and a little bit of toe out in the front to ensure that we get better responsive rotation in cornering. We're going to essentially be using this, like I said, as a baseline there as we chase what the perfect alignment is, which really doesn't exist. That's always going to come down to the tire choice, the track setting, as well as the driver characteristics. So keeping those variables in mind, we're going to use this as a baseline and try to learn as much as we can and then go from there. Alrighty guys, we got all of our unplugged performance suspension links installed on the car and got it aligned, and it feels absolutely dialed. Now we're going to be taking this car in the coming days to Buttonwillow Raceway Park to be using this as a baseline and testing a bunch of comparisons on this platform. Now if you guys haven't seen some of our previous videos on the new Model 3 Performance, go ahead and check out our channel. We do have a lot more to learn. If there's anything that you guys would like to see us test on this car, go ahead and let us know in the comments. Until then, keep an eye out. We're going to have a lot more videos of testing on this car, so stay tuned.